Hi, here we are at Chapter 2, and we're looking at ethical decision-making, personal and professional context. The objectives of this chapter are to describe a process for ethically responsible decision-making, to apply this model, to explain reasons why good people might engage in unethical behavior, and then to explore the impact of managerial roles on the nature of not only our decision-making, but also on our employees' decision-making. This is going to be in two parts. So part 1 will be for Monday, and part 2 will be for Wednesday. So here we go. And to start out immediately, this is also part of a discussion question, discussion board question. What would you do? And we'll talk about this Monday. A student comes into the classroom, finds an iPod on the chair or under a seat, and pick it up. It works good. It has all of the music wanted on it. And you realize you're the only one in the room, and no one will know. So you have an ethical dilemma, or some of us may have an ethical dilemma. That's scenario 1. Then we have scenario 2, and it's just a different take on the first scenario, and then scenario 3, where you are a student representative on a judicial board, and a student kept the iPod and is accused of stealing. So 3 scenarios, and these are the questions we have to ask. We'll do this in class and just kind of ferret through this whole process. But before we do that, let's discuss putting ethics into practice. And ethics requires accountable decision-making. Decision-making per se does not necessarily have to be accountable. Ethical decision-making is accountable, and usually, or most often, all of the stakeholders involved in that decision are favorable. So let's kind of scroll down through this information and see what we can find. Let's see, it talks about every decision you make, okay, even if it's a conscious one or not, involves a choice and taking a stand. And it gives the example of the lost iPod. So ethical decision-making in everyday life, about every decision we make can have an effect on somebody else. So in essence, could be an ethical decision. But what we want to look at is the decisions we make, the way that decision making can go wrong, and the way that business leaders can model effective ethical decision making. One of the reasons for this latter is that they have found that if your managers are ethical, then the majority of the company or the employees will follow suit and follow that role model. So what is ethical decision making? Okay, you look at that. How would you react in that iPod case? What would be the thoughts that would run through your mind? I mean, that's the first part of applying ethics to it. What goes through our minds as we begin to realize that we may be faced with an ethical decision? And here is a process suggested out of the book, and I think it's a fairly good process. First of all, you must determine the facts of the situation. Who are the players in this decision? Who are your stakeholders? What is their viewpoint? What is true? And how do you decide what is true, as far as the facts are concerned? If you go back to the iPod, you wonder, did somebody leave it there purposely? Or it probably slipped out of their pocket. And if it's still working, there's all kinds of scenarios that could go in your head. So after you've recognized, okay, there's a situation, what's the ethical issues involved? And even, is it an ethical decision? Is there an ethical component to this issue? How does one determine that a question raises an ethical issue at all? What are your standards? What decides whether it's ethical or not? When does a business decision become an ethical decision? How do decisions affect, and is that effect ethical or not? Can a business, and this is asked many times, can a business and an economical decision together also be an ethical decision? Can money and the effects of that decision on money, however you want to look at it, can that really become an ethical decision? And one of the things mentioned in the book is ethically sensitive. What does that mean? Basically, we're looking at how do our decisions impact the well-being of the other people around us. How does it affect their happiness, their health, their dignity, their integrity, their freedom, their respect? Does it show respect for them, of all the stakeholders? This leads to, many other considerations. If you take this into consideration, the stakeholders, then should that also be extended to the environment, to animals, to future generations? Is it not also a rippling effect into the future and into others in the global sense? Now, you've got this. There are challenges. There's normative myopia, or what they call short-sightedness about values. There's inattentional blindness, where you just don't see it. You are so focused on the issue at hand that you don't see the ethical issues. And there's one that's very interesting. It's called change blindness. And that kind of happened to the folks at Enron, especially the auditors, maybe the lawyers. They kept agreeing and not understanding, possibly, to what degree things had gotten out of hand. That can happen if it happens over a gradual period of time. So that was step 2. And you have all of these, even before you recognize there is an ethical issue, you have to go through these challenges, and there may be more. The third step is identifying and considering all the stakeholders affected. We kind of did this up here when we got a general idea. Now we're going to drill down, and we're really going to find the stakeholders and list them all out, consider the issues from their perspective. Really look at the issues, turn the tables, walk in their shoes. And what you want to look at is there's a key test for ethical legitimacy, and one is, will all the stakeholders accept the decision as fair? Or if you could accept the decision as legitimate, no matter whose point of view you take, would it be fair, impartial, and ethical? And the other thing you have to look at is, can there be a totally fair decision made? And that takes us to this. A major challenge is decisions may impose cost on some stakeholders, and then you have to ask, are those costs too much? Are they bearable? So you've gone through. Now let's recap here. First of all, you determine the facts, who the players. Then you look at if there's any ethical issues involved, and you have to be on the outlook for these challenges right here. Then you're going to consider and identify all of the stakeholders and try to get their perspective. Fourth, in step 4, you're going to consider all of the available options, okay? And then it's called moral imagination. It's just not to take this or that, but to encompass all of the alternatives. And you want to consider both the obvious and the subtle options. And that may take some brainstorming. That may take getting several different perspectives. And then, of course, you want to do a what if. If we do this, who is affected? How does that happen? How does that roll out? And then in step 5, once you have your alternatives laid out, you want to look at the pros and cons of each. You want to step into the shoes of the other side, of all sides, just not the other side, but from all perspectives. What are the consequences of each? The pros and cons. How do you minimize, if there are harmful, how do you minimize those consequences? What would others think? And typically what we say is, what would your grandma think? That's a biggie. Would your grandma approve? Okay. And then you have to ask yourself your opinion. What kind of person would make this decision? Now, if all of this comes, these in particular, these two here, if there's a feel good about these, then most likely the decision that you've come to is correct, or the alternative that you're looking at. And then finally, after debating the upper 5, you get to step 6, where you make a decision. You want to evaluate the implications of that decision. You want to monitor and learn from the outcomes. Just because you made a decision doesn't mean it's over. You're going to have a feedback loop. And you're going to modify your actions for the next time. So what I would like to do is solve an ethical dilemma in class using this. So be prepared to play. What I would like for you to do is come in with an ethical decision, and we'll all vote on it and decide which ethical decision to try to solve using the above process. So that is your responsibility today, is to make a choice about what ethical dilemma you would like to walk through. Thank you.